Welcome to the Cyber Mylers podcast, cybersecurity news from an analyst and a noob.
I'm Garrett, your analyst.
And I'm Julie. That must mean I'm the noob.
So our first story actually is an update to one we covered way back on our first episode of the Cyber Mylers podcast. Yeah, 3 whole episodes ago.
A little walk down memory lane.
Well, you may remember the 3CX supply chain attack. Involved this 3CX is a voice over IP or VoIP software used by like over 600,000 companies,
including McDonald's. I remember.
Yeah, there you go.
Hashtag not sponsored.
So Mandiant just released this write-up that described how that supply chain attack at 3CX was actually preceded by a different supply chain attack. So someone at 3CX downloaded this derivatives and futures trading application called XTrader from a company called Trading Technologies. Their website was breached back in like February of 2022. A couple months after that, it started delivering a malicious version of their software. So people think that they're downloading, a legitimate software from the source,
right,
but the source has been compromised. So they all get malware. So I'm calling it the supply chain Ception.
Yeah. Well, to me, the chart looks a little bit like a malware MLM, where it's like, hey, you distribute this to your friends, and then they distribute it to their friends.
Phil recruited me to sell these cards, and now I am recruiting you.
And then everybody gets to work from home.
Off the top of my head, I don't recall, many examples of, a supply chain Ception or the MLM of malware happening like this, but that kind of highlights the insidious nature of supply chain attacks because you have a certain degree of trust from this company that you're getting software from, and then all your customers could then fall victim, and all of their customers could fall victim. And
it's contagious.
Yeah. What's kind of silly about this one, though, is that this XTrader software has been phased out since like 2020, but they were still offering it for download on their website. But yeah, that's kind of a good lessons learned right there is if a company says they're no longer supporting a software, maybe you should look for an alternative. Don't download one that's kind of outdated and not being supported anymore.
Now you know.
Mandiant, like CrowdStrike, when we previously covered this, they're still associating it with a North Korean based hacker group, but Mandiant sticks to numbers, so they're calling it uncategorized group number 4736.
Really catchy name.
Yeah, really catchy. But they associate it. They kind of say it's related to what they call APT 43, Advanced Persistent Threat 43, which is associated with
another great name
with North Korea. Each supply chain attack had a different like final payload or like main malware. They compared the two and realized that they use basically the same techniques and even the exact same intermediate malware, like the initial payload and the secondary payload.
Wow.
Same, but different.
That's part of the reason why, that's part of the things they look at when they look at attribution. Well, they're doing the same things in the same way. And if you recall from last time we covered this, it's called DLL sideloading, where a benign executable loads these malicious DLLs or dynamic link libraries. And then, that DLL will decrypt and load malicious shellcode from another DLL, which will then go pull the final stage, the final payload from, a command and control server.
Like a little Rube Goldberg, just ding, 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 going through. And then at the end, you feed your dog.
What I found interesting was one of the intermediate malwares that's called SigFlip uses or relies on this 2013 era vulnerability.
2013.
Yeah.
You'd think we would know how to fix that by now.
Yeah, which is funny because Microsoft did fix this vulnerability, kind of. Executables legitimize themselves by using, by being signed, having this like signed certificate that can be verified. Well, there's a feature where you can add extraneous data to the certificate. It's not really necessary, but you can just kind of add this. It's like almost like a feature. But hackers were basically using this capability, this feature, to load malicious code that
Taking
still,
advantage
it
of it.
wouldn't change the signature. The signature would still seem valid, but now it was padded with this like malicious code. Microsoft was concerned that if they basically just treated all executables that had this certificate with extraneous data as unsigned and untrusted, that it would basically break a bunch of legitimate apps that were just simply using that extra data, putting extra data there for whatever reason.
Yeah, people like their apps. They don't want their apps breaking.
Exactly. So this is where it kind of speaks to, sometimes it's so easy just to say as InfoSec consultants and practitioners to say, well, keep everything updated, right? Just update everything.
Constantly.
Well, Microsoft knows that some updates can break stuff and people can get more upset about their stuff breaking because it's hard to prove that, well, you would have been exploited by a supply chain attack if you didn't. So
but I want to get my job done every day.
Exactly.
An easy way.
Yeah, and this is, I specialize in industrial control system or in critical infrastructure cybersecurity, and that's a really big issue. Is you want to test updates in like a test environment to make sure nothing critical breaks before you deploy it operationally. But I don't have anything critical running on my home computer really, so I just went ahead and made the change myself. It's just like a registry key change, and we'll see. I'll let you know if anything breaks, but as of right now,
again, stay tuned. Things, stories evolve.
Yeah.
Here.
But I'll put a link in the description for anyone that might want to make that change on their own Windows system, because it's ready to go in Windows 10 and 11. It's ready to go. You just have to opt in and enable this registry key.
Let's all try it together.
Well, unless you have critical operations,
unless you have a critical operation,
then
test it.
Exactly.
You can do it.
There you go. So
I'm learning.
by the end of this podcast, you're not going to be a noob, but I'm going to have to find a new noob.
Last episode.
Our next story comes from this Belarus affiliated hacking group. Mandiant, again, with their numbers, calls it an uncategorized group 1151.
Real great name.
Yeah.
Better than the last one.
Some people refer to this hacking group as GhostWriter, but Mandiant treats GhostWriter as a campaign of UNC 1151.
Okay, cool.
But either way, these Belarusian associated or affiliated hackers are doing this information operation campaign. GhostWriter goes back to like actually 2020. The group itself goes back to 2016, but they're basically an anti-NATO because it's Belarus, and they are aligned with Russia. It's this anti-NATO is generally their theme for their hacking group. And so they recently sent out these like text message and emails and Telegram messages.
Telegrams? Like
Joke's on you, because I know Morse code. Ha!
No, like the app, like the messaging app.
Okay, I'm back to being a noob.
You don't use Telegram.
I do not use Telegram in case you didn't tell.
But yeah,
don't use Telegram. Stop. Back to being a noob. Stop.
Yeah. So they were sending out these messages to Polish citizens, like the day after the deadline to register for basically their version of the selective service, kind of like the draft.
Okay.
They said that this Lithuanian, Polish, Ukrainian brigade, this like trilateral brigade, military brigade, they mostly focus on NATO like humanitarian efforts and things like that. Okay. But the messages said that they were going to be deployed, that they were recruiting and deploying to fight Russia in the Ukraine-Russian war. And yeah, so I mean, misinformation campaigns to me are kind of like the lamest, but
exercise your critical thinking bone more often,
Exactly. But the goal is to
keep mine right here.
The goal is to basically stir up social unrest amongst Polish citizens and
propaganda.
Yeah, what's funny is that the emails and whatnot were affiliated with this mon.gov, mon-gov.com website that if you ever feel like an email suspicious, you can plug that domain into Whois, like you can search the Whois database
Mm-hmm.
to basically see like who registered that domain, how long ago. And I kind of did that. And it's only 11 days old as of filming this. So like when the messages were going out on like April 17th or 18th, it was only less than a week old. And another thing I kind of thought was interesting was that the location of the person or entity that registered it was like from Hales Corner, Wisconsin, but then it said it was actually from Washington. There is no Hales Corner, Washington with that zip code. Like that zip code, it's everything except for Washington indicates it's in Milwaukee. And so I don't know. That was just kind of weird, but definitely like a website that was just registered and sending emails. Yeah, that's a big red flag. Well, that wraps up our cybersecurity stories. Let's move on to Beyond the Scope, our segment where you get to talk about something not related to cybersecurity.
Awesome. Great. Well, I have very many passions that do not include cybersecurity.
All of them.
All of them. But one that was brought to my attention this week was something tragic that happened in Florida, where the FWC, or the Florida Wildlife Commission, they did a raid on a person's facility. Now, Florida has a problem with, they're very restrictive now on species that you're allowed to keep as pets. I was a veterinary technician for 8 years when we first got married and such, and I'm very passionate about animals. And Florida is very against reptiles in particular. And so they've started all these new laws and regulations that certain species cannot be kept, or if you already have them, you can keep them, but you can't breed or sell them now. And there was a facility in Florida that was owned by one man, McAdams, and also he was renting out part of it, or kind of sharing part of it with this other man, Coffee, and they both were snake keepers and kept snakes. The one man was licensed. There's debate whether the other guy, Coffee, was licensed to be keeping his or not. He says he was, or he was grandfathered in. An organization called US ARC, which fights for people's rights to keep reptiles, says that he was grandfathered in and should legally be allowed to keep his snakes. But regardless, there's a lot of he said, she said about the situation. But what happened was these officers came to the facility and began euthanizing some of the snakes. And they were only supposed to euthanize the ones that were illegal to be kept in the state, which are pythons, different types of pythons, reticulated pythons. I believe he had a different type of species too. But so they started to euthanize them just right there on site. I believe.
Was he given like a warning? That he had to like dispose of them? Did he have the option to, send them to somewhere where they're legal?
So again, there's kind of different stories. The commission is saying that they had warned him and that he had actually requested that they euthanize him. He's saying he never agreed to that at all.
There's still some debate.
Still some debate about the whole situation.
These pythons are getting euthanized.
But the pythons were getting euthanized on site, and 35 snakes ended up getting killed. There's a video about it. You can watch it because he videotaped the whole thing. And these officers, they weren't doing a great job euthanizing them. Some would still move after the euthanasia was performed. And then even the worst part was they grabbed a snake and euthanized it, and then realized it did not belong to the man who they were supposed to be killing, only his snakes. And it wasn't even a python. It was a boa and belonged to the owner of the facility, who had been raising it for 11 years. And it was actually pregnant with babies and was due to have a litter of snakes any day now. And it was
this
the
is
way
like
that
his
he
business,
made money.
right? Yeah.
He does own another business, but this was his passion and also a way for him to like retire, and kind of like he'd been building up for this. He'd been doing this for over a dozen years.
The boa is dead. What? The boa. The pregnant boa. No. No. Oh my God, that guy's gonna flip out. What is wrong with you guys?
Is there a way to maybe save the babies?
Oh no, dude. This guy's gonna go bananas. Oh my God. Why?
It was a mistake.
How? I reminded you 10 times.
And they killed
Not
him
even
with
a
this
python.
Not even a python, a boa.
Again, that speaks to just these like amateurish, you know what
Yeah.
I mean? Like you show up, doesn't seem like you really know how to properly euthanize a snake, and then you just don't know the difference between
You also can't tell the difference between a boa and a python.
Yeah.
And so to me, it was appalling to watch. And these officers, I think, should be held accountable for this. And not only that, but the whole organization, I think, needs to either train their officers better. I don't know what happened with the miscommunication about this incident, but it definitely needs to be investigated into. And
I suspect there'll be a lawsuit. I'm sure
Yes.
they lost a certain amount of
for sure, hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Hundreds of thousands for
Yeah.
one snake and the babies.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
As of right now, they've made a statement saying that they understand the boa was a misunderstanding and that they're looking into it. I don't believe any of the officers have been fired or even reprimanded. I don't know what's going on. There's been no official statement on that, but
and because we're talking about pets and kind of like an obscure commission that most people probably don't follow, well, it's less likely to like make headlines and so more likely to get swept under the rug, which is just
and
frustrating.
then snakes too. If it was dogs, obviously we'd get a lot more. We'd get so much more attention if it was dogs or cats. But snakes are just as legitimate pets and can be kept and provide people joy. And we have every right to keep them if you're doing what's right for them. So.
Yeah, we don't have snakes, but we do have a tarantula and lizards. And
I would have a snake if I could.
Maybe someday.
He's very patient with you.
We have a lot of weird pets in this house,
including 5 children. So.
Well, anyways, that sums up this week's episode of the Cyber Mylers podcast. Please like and subscribe, and come back next week for another episode.
Yeah, leave us a comment about something you want to hear about next.